The black Bugatti Chiron sat in the driveway like a monument to wealth and abandonment. 3 small hands clutched bright red permanent markers, their owners barely tall enough to reach the door handles. The triplets giggled as they scrawled their names across the glossy paint, their laughter echoing through the empty estate like ghosts of a family that once existed. Emma was 7 years old when she decided her father needed to remember they existed. So did her brothers, Mason and Lucas. They had not seen Richard Thornwood in 6 months, not since the day he walked out with his leather briefcase and never came back. The mansion felt bigger without him, colder, like a museum dedicated to someone else's life. Their mother had stopped crying 3 months ago, but Emma noticed she still set an extra plate at dinner sometimes, then quietly put it away when she realized what she had done. The Thornwood estate sprawled across 5 acres in the wealthiest suburb of Connecticut, a testament to the fortune Richard had built from nothing. The house had 12 bedrooms, a pool that looked like it belonged in a resort, a tennis court that nobody used, and a garage that housed 6 cars worth more than most people would earn in their lifetimes. It was the kind of wealth that should have bought happiness, but instead only purchased loneliness, decorated with expensive furniture. The triplets had been planning their revenge for weeks. Emma was the mastermind, always had been from the moment she emerged from the womb 2 minutes before her brothers. She had notebooks filled with ideas, most of them terrible and involving things like putting frogs in his bed or changing his phone contacts. But the Bugatti felt right, felt permanent, felt like the kind of statement that could not be ignored. Mason was the lookout, his careful analytical mind perfect for timing and strategy. Lucas was the artist, though his definition of art involved stick figures and misspelled words that made Emma laugh despite herself. They waited until Rosa, the maid, went to the market. Emma had timed it perfectly. Rosa left every Tuesday at 2:30 and returned at 4:15. That gave them almost 2 hours. They waited until their mother fell asleep in the library, a wineglass dangling from her fingers like a promise she could not keep. Catherine had been sleeping a lot lately, helped by pills Emma did not understand, and wine that smelled sharp and bitter. The triplets had learned to be quiet, to take care of themselves, to become invisible in their own home. Then they struck. Emma drew a heart with an arrow through it, the kind she had seen in movies about love that lasted forever. Mason wrote Daddy in crooked letters, his hand shaking because part of him knew this was wrong, but the bigger part of him did not care anymore. Lucas just scribbled his name over and over until the marker ran dry. Lucas, 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 like a prayer or a curse. They stood back to admire their work, 3 children who had turned a $3 million car into a canvas of abandonment. The marker bled into the paint, permanent and defiant. Emma felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with terror. They had really done it. There was no taking it back now. Mason looked worried, his face pale. Lucas was still giggling, too young to fully understand the magnitude of what they had accomplished. Emma grabbed both their hands and pulled them toward the house, suddenly aware that Rosa would be home soon, and they needed to look innocent. What they did not know was that Rosa had been watching from the kitchen window the entire time. What they did not know was that Rosa had been hiding something far more valuable than expensive cars. What they did not know was that their entire lives were built on a lie that was about to crack wide open. Rosa was not just a maid. She was a ghost from Richard Thornwood's past, a woman who had loved him before money turned him into marble, before success carved away everything human about him. 20 years ago, she had been Isabella Rodriguez, a law student at Columbia University, with dreams bigger than the apartment she shared with 3 roommates in Washington Heights. Richard had been a struggling entrepreneur who ate ramen for dinner and wore the same suit to every meeting, held together by determination and desperation in equal measure. They had met at a coffee shop in Brooklyn where Isabella worked part-time to pay her tuition. Richard came in every morning at 6:30 and ordered the same thing, black coffee and a blueberry muffin, always leaving exactly $1 tip. He had kind eyes back then, before they turned calculating. He laughed easily, before success taught him that laughter was weakness. Isabella had served him coffee for 3 months before he finally asked her name. 6 months later, they were inseparable. They had been in love the way young people love, desperately and completely, as if the world would end if they spent a single night apart. Richard would show up at her apartment at midnight with Thai food and big dreams, talking about the company he was building, the future they would have together. Isabella would edit his business proposals between study sessions, her legal mind sharpening his vision. They were partners, best friends, lovers, everything. He told her he was going to marry her. She believed him with a certainty that only comes from being 23 and in love. Then Richard's tech company exploded. A viral app, perfect timing, the right investors. Within 2 years, he went from sleeping on her couch to buying penthouses in Manhattan. The money changed him slowly, like rust eating through metal. He started forgetting their dinner plans, canceling at the last minute because a meeting ran late or an investor needed attention. He stopped asking about her day, stopped reading her law papers, stopped looking at her like she was the most important person in his world. He hired assistants who looked like models and wore suits that cost more than Isabella's monthly rent. He started attending galas and charity events in circles where Isabella did not fit, where her Washington Heights accent marked her as an outsider. He looked at her like she was a photograph of someone he used to know, instead of a person standing right in front of him. Isabella watched him drift away like a boat slipping from its moorings, slow enough that she did not realize he was gone until she could not reach him anymore. When he married Catherine Montgomery, the daughter of a real estate mogul whose family tree went back to the Mayflower, Isabella was not even invited to the wedding. She found out by reading about it in the New York Times Society pages, a full-color spread showing Richard in a tuxedo and Catherine in a dress that cost more than Isabella's entire education. Isabella remembers sitting on her bathroom floor, reading that article over and over, trying to understand how the men who promised to love her forever had forgotten she existed. She had cried for 3 days straight. Then she stopped crying and made a decision that would define the next decade of her life. She changed her name to Rosa Martinez. She dyed her hair darker, cut it shorter, bought reading glasses she did not need. She got a job as a housekeeper through an agency that specialized in high-end placements, and through a twist of fate that felt more like destiny, she ended up working for Richard Thornwood. He did not recognize her. 10 years and a different hair color had erased her from his memory completely. She cleaned his house, folded his shirts, and watched him build a family with another woman. And every single day, she wondered if she was a masochist or just heartbroken. For the first 2 years, Isabella told herself she would quit soon. She would find another job, move to another city, start over somewhere. Richard's shadow did not follow her. But she stayed, trapped by some combination of hope and punishment, wanting him to recognize her and terrified that he would. She watched him with Catherine, saw how their marriage was built on social obligation rather than love. She saw how Catherine tried so hard to be perfect, to be the wife Richard needed for his image. She saw how Richard looked through Catherine the same way he had eventually looked through her. Then Catherine got pregnant, and Isabella almost left. She could not watch him raise children, build the family he had promised her. But Catherine's pregnancy was difficult. She was hospitalized twice for complications. Richard was traveling constantly, building his empire, while his wife lay in a hospital bed, terrified of losing the babies. Isabella found herself staying late, bringing Catherine magazines, listening to her fears. Despite everything, despite hating this woman who had the life Isabella wanted, She found herself caring about her. The triplets were born premature, tiny, fragile things fighting for every breath. Emma came out first, screaming with her tiny fists clenched, furious at being forced into the world too soon. Mason followed 2 minutes later, quiet and observant, his eyes already taking in everything around him. Lucas was last, giggling even as the doctor held him up, a sound that made everyone in the delivery room laugh, despite the tension. They spent 6 weeks in the NICU, and Isabella visited them every day, standing outside the glass, watching these tiny humans fight to survive. Rosa fell in love with them, the way she had once fallen in love with their father, completely and irrevocably. She watched them grow from helpless infants into curious toddlers into the 7-year-old hurricanes they were now. She wiped their tears when they fell, when Richard was in Tokyo or London or Los Angeles chasing deals. She taught them to tie their shoes when Catherine was too overwhelmed to remember. She read them bedtime stories when their parents forgot, her voice filling the silence with tales of brave knights and clever princesses. She became the parent Richard refused to be, and Catherine was too broken to manage. Emma's first word was Rosa, not Mama or Dada, but Rosa, and Isabella had cried in the bathroom for an hour afterward. Mason trusted her with his nightmares, when he would not tell anyone else. Lucas drew her pictures and taped them to her door, childish crayon drawings that she kept in a box under her bed like treasures. They were not her children, but they felt like hers in every way that mattered. 3 years ago, Rosa discovered something that should have remained buried. She was cleaning Richard's office when she found a folder hidden in a locked drawer. She should not have opened it, but curiosity is a disease without a cure. The lock was easy to pick, a skill she had learned from a misspent youth. Inside were documents that made her blood freeze. Paternity tests, medical records, legal papers with words like fraud and conspiracy stamped across them in red ink. Email printouts showing conversations between Richard and a private investigator. Bank statements showing payments to lawyers specializing in family law. And photographs, dozens of them, showing Catherine with another man. Isabella read every document twice, her hands shaking. The triplets were not Richard's biological children. They were the result of Catherine's affair with Daniel Foster, Richard's former best friend and business partner. Catherine had gotten pregnant during a weekend conference in Chicago, a weekend when Richard was in Tokyo closing a deal. The dates were clear, irrefutable. Catherine had panicked, terrified of losing her marriage and her lifestyle. She had convinced Richard the babies were his, counting on the chaos of triplets to keep him too distracted to do the math. It had worked for 7 years, but Richard had found out. The medical records showed he had ordered a paternity test when the triplets were 6 years old. Right after a routine blood test revealed his blood type made it genetically impossible for him to be their father. Richard was type O. The triplets were type AB. Genetically impossible. He had confronted Catherine quietly, without drama, in his office after the children were asleep. There had been screaming, threats, broken dishes, and ultimatums. Catherine had begged him to stay, promising it was a one-time mistake, swearing Daniel meant nothing, just a moment of weakness after too many drinks at the hotel bar. Richard had stayed, but something inside him died. He stopped touching Catherine, moved into a separate bedroom. He stopped playing with the children, stopped attending their school events. He became a ghost haunting his own life, present in body but absent in every way that mattered. He threw himself into work, traveling more, staying away longer. The house became a mausoleum, beautiful and cold and empty. Isabella read those documents and felt her world shift. Part of her felt vindicated. Richard's perfect life was built on the same lies that had destroyed theirs. But a bigger part of her felt devastated for the children. They had no idea. They loved Richard completely, desperately, the way children love their parents. Finding out would destroy them. She put the documents back exactly as she found them and locked a drawer. She never mentioned it to anyone. She kept the secret because she loved those children more than truth. She kept the secret because she knew it would destroy them. She kept the secret because some lies are kinder than reality. But secrets have a way of rotting from the inside out. They fester and spread until they poison everything they touch. Isabella's secret was about to explode, and 3 children with permanent markers were holding the match. 2 hours after the triplets vandalized the Bugatti, Richard showed up unannounced. Catherine was still asleep in the library, the wine glass now empty on the floor beside her, her hair tangled and makeup smeared. Emma heard the car first, the low rumble of an engine that cost more than most people's houses. She looked out the window and saw her father's silver Mercedes pulling into the driveway. Her heart jumped the way it always did when she thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time he would stay. Maybe this time he would look at her the way he used to before everything changed. Richard got out of the car, wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe. His hair was graying at the temples in a way that made him look distinguished instead of old, that made him look like the successful businessman he was. He walked toward the house like he owned it, which technically he still did, at least until the divorce was finalized. His expression was neutral, controlled, the face he wore in boardrooms and negotiations. Then he saw the Bugatti. Emma watched his face change. She saw surprise flash across his features, then anger tightening his jaw, then something that looked almost like sadness before his expression went blank again. That careful mask sliding back into place. He walked over to the car slowly, his expensive shoes clicking on the driveway. He ran his fingers across the childish drawings like they were written in blood instead of marker, tracing Emma's heart, Mason's words, Lucas's repeated name. He stood there for a long time, just staring, and Emma wondered what he was thinking, if he understood what they had been trying to say. Rosa appeared in the doorway. She was wearing her usual gray dress and white apron, her dark hair pulled back in a bun, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked at Richard, and for just a moment, something passed between them. Something old and complicated that Emma was too young to understand. It was recognition mixed with pain, love twisted into bitterness. A lifetime of unspoken words compressed into a single glance. The children did this, Rosa said quietly. It was not a question. She had watched them do it, after all. Obviously, Richard said. His voice was cold, the way it always was now, devoid of the warmth Emma remembered from when she was younger. Where's Catherine? Asleep. Of course she is. Richard sighed and rubbed his face, suddenly looking tired despite the expensive suit. Get the children. I need to talk to them. Rosa hesitated. Emma saw it. That tiny moment of resistance, that protective instinct before she nodded and went inside. Emma's stomach twisted into knots. She had wanted her father to notice them, to come back, to acknowledge they existed. But now that he was here, she suddenly felt terrified. She had not thought past the act of vandalism to the consequences that would follow, had not considered what would happen when the fantasy of his return met the reality of his anger. 5 minutes later, the triplets stood in the foyer like criminals awaiting sentencing. The foyer was massive, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, designed to impress visitors with the Thornwood wealth. Now, it just felt cold. Richard looked at them with an expression Emma could not read. Was it anger? Disappointment? Sadness? All 3 mixed together? Lucas started crying before anyone said anything. Big hiccuping sobs that made his whole body shake, tears streaming down his face. Mason grabbed Emma's hand and squeezed so hard it hurt, his fingernails digging into her palm. Do you know how much that car costs? Richard asked. His voice was measured, controlled, dangerous in its calmness. $3 million, Mason whispered. He had looked it up on the internet while they were planning, had shown Emma and Lucas the article about limited edition Bugattis. 3.2 million, Richard corrected. Do you have $3.2 million? They shook their heads in unison, 3 children who suddenly understood the magnitude of what they had done. Then why would you destroy something that does not belong to you? Why would you damage property that you could never afford to replace? Emma found her voice, small and shaking, but there, forced out through the fear lodged in her throat. You destroyed us, and we belong to you. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Richard's jaw tightened, muscles working under his skin. Rosa made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob, her hand flying to her mouth. Lucas cried harder, his sobs echoing through the cavernous foyer. Mason's hand crushed Emma's fingers, bones grinding together. I did not destroy you, Richard said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. You left, Emma said. Her own eyes were burning now, tears threatening to spill over. You left, and you never came back, and Mom cries all the time, and we thought maybe if we did something bad enough, you would have to come back and notice we exist. We thought, if we made you angry enough, at least you would feel something about us. Richard looked at her for a long moment. Emma saw something shift behind his eyes, saw the mask crack just slightly. Then he looked at Rosa, and Emma saw something pass between them again. That same complicated thing she did not understand, loaded with history she could not begin to fathom. Richard's shoulders sagged, like someone had cut the strings, holding him upright. Like the weight of maintaining his composure was finally too much. I'm not your father, he said quietly. The words did not make sense at first. Emma heard them, the syllables registering, but her brain could not process what they meant. They were just sounds, disconnected from reality. She looked at Mason, who looked equally confused, his analytical mind struggling to compute. Lucas stopped crying and wiped his nose on his sleeve, staring at Richard with red, puffy eyes. What? Emma asked. The word came out barely above a whisper. I'm not your biological father, Richard repeated, each word precise and cutting. Your mother had an affair with my business partner. You're not mine. You never were. The paternity test proved it a year ago. You're Daniel Foster's children, conceived while I was halfway around the world building a company. The world tilted sideways. Emma felt like she was falling even though she was standing still, like gravity had reversed and she was plummeting upward into nothing. Mason's hand went limp in hers, his grip loosening as shock took over. Lucas started crying again, louder this time, great heaving wails that seemed to shake the very walls. You're lying, Emma said, but her voice sounded far away, like it was coming from someone else. You're lying because you're angry about the car. I wish I was. Richard pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and held it out, his hand steady despite everything. Paternity test, done a year ago. You're Daniel Foster's children. He was my business partner, my best friend, before your mother destroyed that too. Before she slept with him in a hotel room in Chicago and then lied about it for 7 years. Richard, stop, Rosa said sharply, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. They're 7 years old. They don't need every detail. They're old enough to understand why I left. Richard's voice was bitter now, years of suppressed anger finally leaking out. They're old enough to understand that the woman sleeping off her wine in the library lied to everyone for 7 years. They're old enough to know I stayed as long as I could stand it, trying to love children who weren't mine, trying to forgive a wife who betrayed me with my best friend, trying to pretend everything was fine when my entire life was built on someone else's lie. They're children, Rosa said again, louder this time, stepping between Richard and the triplets like a shield. Your anger at Catherine is not their fault. They didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask for any of this. Nothing is my fault anymore, Richard said, his voice rising. I'm done. I'm done pretending. I'm done playing house. I'm done being the villain in a story I never wanted to be part of. I'm done raising another man's children while everyone expects me to smile and be grateful. He looked at the triplets one last time, and Emma saw something in his eyes that looked almost like regret. I'm sorry you got caught in the middle. I'm sorry your mother made the choices she made. But I'm not your father, and I can't keep pretending I am. I can't keep looking at you and seeing her betrayal. I can't keep pretending that biology doesn't matter when every time I look at you I remember that my best friend slept with my wife and created you. He turned and walked toward his car, his footsteps echoing on the marble. Emma wanted to scream, to beg him to stay, to tell him she did not care about biology, that he was still her dad, that DNA was just letters and numbers and did not erase 7 years of being her father. But her throat had closed up and no words would come out, her voice trapped behind a dam of shock and pain. She just stood there, frozen, watching the only father she had ever known walk away from her like she was nothing. Richard stopped beside the Bugatti. He looked at the marker drawings one more time, at Emma's heart and Mason's crooked letters and Lucas's scribbled name, all those desperate attempts to be seen. His hand reached out and touched the heart Emma had drawn, his fingers tracing the arrow she had put through it. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call, and 30 minutes later a tow truck came to take the car away. He supervised the loading, made sure the driver knew to take it to his private garage. He never even looked back at the house, never glanced at the window where Emma was watching. He just got in his Mercedes and drove away, leaving 3 children and a maid standing in a foyer that suddenly felt as empty as a tomb, as cold as space, as silent as death. Catherine woke up 2 hours later and found Rosa sitting with the triplets in the kitchen. They had not moved from where Rosa had taken them, had not spoken except to answer simple questions about whether they wanted water or needed the bathroom. Lucas had cried himself into hiccups that would not stop. Mason stared at the table like it held the answers to questions he did not know how to ask. Emma just felt numb, like someone had scooped out her insides with a spoon and left her hollow, a shell of a person with nothing inside. What happened? Catherine asked. Her voice was rough from sleep and wine, her hair messy and tangled, mascara smudged under her eyes like bruises. She looked old suddenly, older than her 35 years, worn down by secrets and lies. Richard was here, Rosa said quietly, carefully, like she was defusing a bomb. Catherine's face went white, all the color draining in an instant. What did he say? He told them. Catherine grabbed the counter to steady herself, her knuckles white. Oh God, no, not like this. He promised he wouldn't. He promised we would tell them together when they were older. She looked at her children, and Emma saw something break in her mother's face, saw the last pieces of her composure shatter. Babies, I can explain. Please, I can explain everything. Is it true? Emma asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, mechanical and flat, drained of all emotion. You had an affair? We're not his? Everything he said was true? Catherine's silence was answer enough. The seconds stretched out, each one heavier than the last. She sank into a chair like her legs could not hold her anymore and put her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. I made a mistake. One mistake. One weekend, one night of too much wine and feeling lonely and scared. One night, and it destroyed everything. Everything. Does Daniel know? Mason asked. His voice was clinical, analytical, trying to process this information like a math problem with a clear solution. Does our real father know we exist? No, Catherine whispered. Richard wanted to tell him, wanted to destroy him too, to ruin his marriage and his life the way mine was ruined. But I begged him not to. Daniel has a family, a wife he loves, 2 daughters who adore him. Telling him would ruin their lives too, would destroy an entire family that has nothing to do with my mistakes. So everyone gets ruined anyway, Emma said flatly, bitterly, years older than her 7 years. Great plan, Mom, really great plan. Catherine flinched like Emma had struck her. I know you're angry. I know you hate me. I hate me too. I've hated myself every single day for 7 years. But I need you to understand something. I love you 3 more than anything in this entire world. More than Richard, more than Daniel, more than my own life. You are not a mistake. You will never be a mistake to me. You are the only good thing to come from the worst decision I ever made. But we're the reason Dad left, Lucas said through his hiccups, his small voice breaking. If we weren't born, he would have stayed. He would still love you. He would still love us. No, baby, no. Catherine pulled Lucas into her lap, holding him tight, crushing him against her chest. I'm the reason Dad left. Me, my choices, my lies. You 3 are perfect and innocent and wonderful, and I am so sorry you got caught in this mess. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to tell the truth from the beginning. I'm sorry. I was too scared of losing everything to do the right thing. Rosa watched from the doorway, her face unreadable, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Emma looked at her and suddenly remembered the way she had looked at Richard earlier, that complicated expression loaded with history. An idea started forming in her mind, terrible and impossible, pieces clicking together that should not fit. Rosa, Emma said slowly, carefully, how long have you worked for us? Rosa's face went carefully blank. That mask she wore so well. 7 years, since before you were born. Why? Why? I needed a job. Jobs are not easy to find. But why this job? Why our family? There are lots of rich families in Connecticut. Why did you pick us? Emma, Catherine said sharply, her voice cutting. Don't interrogate Rosa. She's been nothing but good to us. She's been more of a mother to you than I have some days. But Emma could not let it go. Something was clicking into place, a puzzle she had not known she was solving, pieces fitting together to reveal a picture she did not understand, but knew was important. You look at Dad weird, like you know him from somewhere else, like you're sad or angry, or something complicated when you see him. Rosa's hands tightened on her apron, her knuckles white. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. I've seen it. I've been seeing it for years, but I never thought about it until now. The way you watch him sometimes, like you're sad or maybe angry, like seeing him hurts you. Emma stood up, her chair scraping against the floor, the sound harsh in the quiet kitchen. Who are you really? Why are you really here? The kitchen went silent. Catherine looked between Emma and Rosa, confusion dawning on her face, understanding creeping in slowly. Mason was watching now too, his sharp mind catching up to whatever Emma was chasing, connections forming. Lucas had stopped crying, sensing something important was happening, something that would change everything again. Rosa stood very still for a long moment, barely breathing. Then she untied her apron with shaking hands and set it on the counter like she was surrendering. She reached up and pulled the pins from her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders in dark waves. She took off her reading glasses and set them beside the apron. She looked different suddenly, younger somehow, not like a maid but like someone else entirely, someone beautiful and sad and dangerous. My name is not Rosa Martinez, she said quietly, each word precise and painful. It's Isabella Rodriguez. 20 years ago, before any of you existed, I was in love with your father. We were together for 3 years. He was going to propose. I saw the ring. He told me I was the love of his life. Then he got rich, and I became inconvenient, an embarrassment from his poor past. He married your mother and forgot I existed. Like I was nothing. Like those 3 years meant nothing. Catherine's face went through several emotions at once. Shock, confusion, recognition, anger, and finally something that looked almost like understanding, like pieces clicking into place for her too. You've been here the whole time? 7 years? Watching us? Watching him? Why would you do that to yourself? Because I'm an idiot, Isabella said, her voice breaking slightly. Because I thought maybe if I could be close to him again, it would hurt less. Spoiler alert, it didn't. It hurt more. Every single day, watching him with you, with the children, building a life in the house his money bought, the house he could have given me if I had been good enough, rich enough, from the right family. Every single day was torture. But then I fell in love with them. She looked at the triplets, and her eyes were wet with unshed tears. I fell in love with Emma and Mason and Lucas the moment I held them in the hospital. I stayed for them. I raised them when you two were too busy destroying each other. I became their mother when neither of you could be. Emma's world was tilting again, spinning out of control. Nothing made sense anymore. Her father was not her father. The maid was not a maid. Her mother was a liar. Everything she thought she knew was built on sand, and the tide was coming in fast. So all of this, Catherine said slowly, her voice shaking. Every time you comforted me when Richard pulled away, every time you helped me with the kids when I was overwhelmed, every time you listened to me complain about my marriage, every time you acted like a friend, you were really his ex-girlfriend? You were the woman he loved before me? I was really someone who loved your children more than revenge, Isabella said fiercely, defensively. I could have told you who I was years ago. I could have caused problems, stirred up drama, destroyed what little peace you had, but I didn't, because it would have hurt them. Everything I did, every choice I made, was to protect them. Not you, not Richard, them. Catherine laughed, a broken sound that was more sob than amusement. This is insane. This whole situation is absolutely insane. My children aren't my husband's, my maid is his ex-girlfriend, and I'm the villain who destroyed everything. Welcome to my last 7 years, Isabella said bitterly. They sat in silence, 4 people and 3 children in a kitchen that felt too small for all the secrets it now held, walls closing in under the weight of revealed truths. Emma's mind was racing, trying to process everything, trying to make sense of a world that had been turned upside down and shaken. Her father was not her father, but he was the only father she knew. Her mother had lied but still loved them, had made a terrible mistake, but did not stop caring. The maid was her father's ex-girlfriend who had been hiding in plain sight for 7 years, loving them from the shadows. Nothing made sense, but somehow it all made perfect, terrible sense. What happens now? Mason asked. He always asked the practical questions, always tried to find the solution, the next step forward. No one had an answer. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain and terrifying, an ocean of unknowns. The house felt different now, like it was made of paper instead of stone, ready to collapse at any moment under the weight of revealed secrets. Outside, the space where the Bugatti had been sat, empty, a rectangular patch of concrete marking where a $3 million car had been, a monument to everything that was broken and could not be fixed. But Emma looked at her mother, broken and crying, but still there, still present. She looked at her brothers, confused and scared, but holding each other, their hands linked together. She looked at Isabella, who had loved them when no one else would, who had stayed when staying meant daily torture. And she thought, maybe, just maybe, family was not about blood or DNA or who married who. Maybe family was about who stayed, who showed up, who wiped tears and read bedtime stories and loved you even when the world fell apart and everything went wrong. "We figure it out," Emma said finally, her voice stronger than before, filled with a determination that surprised even her. "Together, all of us, we figure it out, one day at a time." It was not much. It was barely a plan. But it was a start, and sometimes that is all you can ask for. The weeks that followed were complicated in ways Emma had not thought possible. Catherine and Isabella had a series of painful conversations that involved a lot of yelling, some crying, and eventually, something that looked almost like understanding. They would sit at the kitchen table long after the children went to bed, sharing wine and stories and pain. Isabella told Catherine about the years with Richard, about the promises he made and broke. Catherine told Isabella about the loneliness of her marriage, about how she had never felt good enough for Richard's world, about how Daniel had made her feel seen for one single night. Richard's lawyers sent papers demanding Catherine prove she had not committed fraud, wanting paternity tests for the divorce proceedings, threatening to sue for the return of money spent, raising children who were not his. Catherine's lawyers fired back with counterclaims about emotional abandonment and breach of marital duty. It became ugly fast, the kind of divorce that made headlines in business journals and society pages. Daniel Foster somehow found out about the paternity issue. Someone leaked it, maybe one of the lawyers or a court clerk looking for quick money from a tabloid. He showed up at the house drunk one Saturday afternoon, pounding on the door and demanding to see Catherine. He wanted to know if the children were his, wanted to know why she had lied, wanted to know if he had 3 kids he had never known about. Catherine refused to let him in. She stood at the door with Isabella behind her, 2 women who had been rivals now united against this man who represented both their mistakes. Daniel threatened to sue for custody, to demand DNA tests, to destroy Catherine's reputation. Isabella called the police. Daniel was escorted away, shouting about his rights and his children, leaving the triplets watching from upstairs windows, confused about who this angry man was and why he claimed to be their father. Through it all, the triplets tried to make sense of their new reality. Mason researched genetics and DNA, reading scientific papers about heredity and biological relationships. He announced one morning at breakfast that DNA did not determine worth, that families were built on choice, not chromosomes. He gave a presentation to his sisters, complete with charts and graphs, trying to logic his way through the pain. Lucas drew pictures obsessively, pictures of their family that always included Isabella now, standing close to them like a guardian angel. Pictures of Richard standing far away, separated by a chasm drawn in black crayon. Pictures of a house divided, with everyone in different rooms, no one connected. His art teacher at school called Catherine, worried about the darkness in his drawings, about the sadness seeping through every line. Emma wrote letters to Richard that she never sent, letter after letter, trying to explain that she understood why he left but wished he had loved them anyway. She wrote about her day at school, about the math tests she aced, about the piano recital he would not attend. She wrote about how much it hurt to lose him, how much she missed him, how much she wished biology did not matter. The letters piled up in a shoebox under her bed, unsent messages to a father who had stopped listening. Isabella moved out of the maid's quarters and into one of the guest rooms. She stopped wearing her uniform, started dressing like herself again instead of the invisible servant she had pretended to be. She and Catherine developed an unlikely friendship, bonded by shared pain and love for 3 children who needed stability more than anything. They took turns making breakfast, both terrible cooks who burned toast and scrambled eggs until they learned together. They helped with homework, dividing subjects based on their strengths. Isabella handling math, and Catherine managing reading. They sat up late at night drinking wine and talking about Richard, about mistakes, about forgiveness, about how to rebuild a family from broken pieces. One night, 3 months after the Bugatti incident, Emma woke up and heard voices in the kitchen. She crept downstairs and found Isabella and Catherine sitting at the table, a bottle of wine between them, both looking exhausted but somehow lighter than before. "I can't believe I'm saying this," Catherine was saying, her words slightly slurred, "but I'm glad you stayed. The kids need you. Hell, I think I need you too. You're the only person who understands what it's like to love Richard and lose him." "I spent 7 years hating you," Isabella admitted, swirling her wine glass. "But you're not who I thought you'd be. You're not the evil socialite who stole my life. You're messy and broken, and you make terrible decisions, but you love them completely. You love those kids with everything you have." "So do you," Catherine said quietly, reaching across the table to squeeze Isabella's hand. "Maybe that's enough. Maybe love is enough to fix this. Maybe we can build something new from all this wreckage." "Maybe," Isabella said, squeezing back. "Maybe we can." Emma smiled and went back to bed, her heart feeling lighter than it had in months. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But maybe it was enough. School became complicated. Other kids asked why Emma's dad never picked them up anymore, why it was always their mom and some lady who looked like a maid but did not act like one. Emma learned to deflect, to change the subject, to protect the complicated truth of her family. Mason got into a fight when another kid called their mom a cheater, came home with a black eye and a 3-day suspension. Lucas started seeing the school counselor twice a week, drawing pictures of his feelings because he could not find words for them. The holidays were the hardest. Thanksgiving came and Richard was not there. Christmas arrived and his chair at the table stayed empty. The triplets had always loved Christmas, the decorations and presents and magic of it all. This year felt hollow. Catherine tried to compensate, buying too many presents, decorating too elaborately, cooking too much food. Isabella helped, stringing lights and baking cookies, trying to fill the Richard-shaped hole with presents and effort. On Christmas morning, the triplets opened their presents in the living room, surrounded by Catherine and Isabella, trying to pretend everything was fine. Emma opened a box from Richard, shipped from his lawyer's office with no personal note. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with 3 charms, a heart, a star, and a tiny hand-drawn angel that looked exactly like the one she had drawn on the Bugatti. There was a note underneath in Richard's handwriting. "I kept this from the car before they repainted it, because even when I was angry and hurt and stupid, I knew these drawings meant you loved me. I'm sorry it took me so long to figure out how to love you back. You're my daughter in every way that matters. Always have been, always will be. Maybe we can talk soon. Love, Dad." Emma cried, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Mason and Lucas crowded around her, reading the note over her shoulder, their own eyes wet. Catherine and Isabella held each other, crying for different reasons, mourning and celebrating at the same time. Emma put on the bracelet and never took it off. It became her talisman, her reminder that love could survive even the worst betrayals, that family was more than biology, that maybe Richard had not given up on them after all. In January, Richard called. Not through lawyers, but directly, his number showing up on Catherine's phone at 7 in the evening. Catherine stared at it for 3 rings before answering, her hand shaking. Emma watched from the doorway, holding her breath. "The kids got the bracelets," Catherine said quietly. "Emma hasn't stopped crying. Thank you for that." Richard's voice was muffled through the phone, but Emma could hear him talking, could hear something that sounded like emotion. Catherine listened for a long time, tears streaming down her face, nodding, even though he could not see her. "Okay," Catherine finally said. "Okay. Saturday at 2. I'll tell them. Richard, Don't hurt them again. Please. I can survive you hating me, but they can't survive losing you twice." She hung up and looked at Emma. "Your dad wants to see you. All of you. Saturday. Is that okay?" Emma nodded, unable to speak. Mason appeared from the living room, Lucas trailing behind him. They had all been listening, all waiting to see if the phone call would change anything. Saturday came slowly. The triplets spent days preparing, changing outfits a dozen times, practicing what they would say. Isabella helped them, offering advice about forgiveness and second chances. Catherine stayed quiet, terrified that Richard would hurt them again, that this was just another way for him to walk away. They met at a park, neutral territory. Richard was already there when they arrived, sitting on a bench feeding pigeons like he had all the time in the world. He looked different, thinner somehow, older. His suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a sweater Emma had never seen him wear. He looked almost like the dad she remembered from when she was 5, before everything got complicated. The triplets approached slowly, unsure. Richard stood up, his hands in his pockets, looking nervous in a way Emma had never seen him look before. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi," Emma said back. They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then Lucas ran forward and hugged Richard, wrapping his small arms around his waist and squeezing tight. Mason followed, then Emma, all three of them holding onto their dad, like he might disappear if they let go. Richard hugged them back, and Emma felt him shaking, felt tears dropping onto her head. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I was angry and hurt, and I blamed you for things that weren't your fault. You didn't ask for any of this. You're just kids who wanted a dad, and I abandoned you because I was too much of a coward to deal with my own pain." "Are you coming home?" Lucas asked, his voice muffled against Richard's sweater. "No, buddy. I'm not coming home. Your mom and we're done. But that doesn't mean I'm done with you. I want to be your dad again, if you'll let me. A different kind of dad, maybe. One who lives somewhere else and sees you on weekends. But still your dad. Still here. Still loving you." "What about the DNA?" Mason asked, ever practical. "What about Daniel Foster?" "DNA is just science," Richard said. "It doesn't change the fact that I changed your diapers and taught you to ride bikes and read you bedtime stories. It doesn't change 7 years of being your dad. Daniel Foster is a stranger who donated genetic material. I'm the one who raised you. That makes me your father in every way that matters." They spent 3 hours at that park, talking and crying and slowly rebuilding something that had been shattered. Richard told them about therapy, about how he had spent the last 6 months working through his anger and hurt. He told them about realizing that punishing them for Catherine's mistakes was the worst thing he had ever done. He told them he wanted to try again, to be better, to show up for them even when it was hard. It was not forgiveness, not yet. The hurt was too deep, too fresh. But it was a beginning, a tiny seed of hope planted in scorched earth, waiting to see if it could grow. The months that followed were slow healing. Richard came to Emma's piano recital, sitting in the back row next to Catherine and Isabella in an arrangement that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. He showed up for Mason's science fair, asking intelligent questions about the solar system project. He attended Lucas's art show, standing in front of his son's drawings of divided families and crying openly, not caring who saw. He took them for ice cream every other Saturday. He helped with homework over video calls. He remembered birthdays and school events and soccer games. He was not perfect, not even close. There were missed calls and forgotten promises and moments when the old anger resurfaced. But he showed up more than he disappeared, tried harder than he quit, loved louder than he hurt. Daniel Foster tried to establish paternity through the courts. He hired expensive lawyers and demanded DNA tests, claiming parental rights he had never exercised. The case went to family court, a 3-day trial that was covered by local news outlets, hungry for scandal. Richard showed up at the courthouse with his own lawyers and mountains of documentation. 7 years of school records with his name listed as father. Medical records showing he had taken them to every doctor appointment. Photos and videos of birthdays and holidays. Testimonies from teachers and neighbors about his involvement in their lives. Evidence of a father who had been present in every legal and practical sense. The judge listened to both sides. Daniel's lawyer argued for biological rights, for the sanctity of genetic connection. Richard's lawyer argued for psychological parentage, for the bond built over years of daily care. The triplets were brought in for private interviews, asked who they considered their father. All three said Richard. Emma told the judge about the bracelet she still wore. Mason explained his research about chosen families. Lucas showed the judge his drawings, pictures of Richard holding their hands, pictures of their family with Isabella included, pictures that showed love built over years, not biology determined in a moment. The judge took one look at the case, at 3 children who called Richard dad and had no relationship with Daniel whatsoever, and threw it out. Biology, the judge said, was not the same as parenthood. Parenthood was earned through years of love and presence, through midnight fevers and scraped knees, and homework help and bedtime stories. It was not determined by a DNA test, but by showing up every single day and choosing to be a parent. Daniel had contributed genetic material, but Richard had contributed a childhood. The law recognized the difference. Daniel appealed, dragging the case out for another 6 months. His wife divorced him when she found out about the affair and the secret children. His daughters stopped speaking to him. His business partnership with Richard had dissolved years ago, but now his reputation followed him everywhere. The man who slept with his best friend's wife and then tried to claim children he had never met. He lost the appeal. The judge's ruling was upheld. Richard was legally and practically the triplets' father. Daniel was ordered to stay away, to stop contacting the family, to accept that biology did not equal family. Emma was 10 years old when she finally understood what that meant. She stood outside a courthouse holding Richard's hand, with Mason and Lucas on either side. Catherine and Isabella bringing up the rear like guardian angels. They were not a traditional family. They were messy and complicated, and built on lies that had somehow transformed into truth. But they were family in every way that mattered. Richard and Catherine's divorce was finalized that same month. It was amicable in the end, both of them too tired to fight anymore. They split assets fairly, agreed on custody arrangements that put the children first. Richard bought a house 10 minutes away, close enough for the triplets to bike over after school. Catherine kept the mansion but sold it a year later, moving into something smaller and warmer, a house that felt like a home instead of a museum. Isabella officially became their nanny instead of their maid, a promotion that came with better pay and recognition of what she had always been. She moved into the new house with Catherine, taking a room on the 2nd floor with windows that faced the garden. She and Catherine became partners in raising the triplets, 2 women who had loved the same man and found something better in loving his children together. It was unconventional, complicated, the kind of arrangement that made people whisper at PTA meetings. But it worked for them, and that was all that mattered. Richard started dating again, carefully and slowly, bringing women home to meet the triplets, only when relationships became serious. Emma vetted each one like a suspicious bodyguard, asking pointed questions about their intentions and whether they understood that the triplets came first always. Most did not last long. The ones who could not accept that Richard came with 3 children and a complicated ex-wife, and his ex-girlfriend who lived with his ex-wife did not make it past the 2nd date. Richard was fine with that. He had learned the hard way that love required sacrifice, that being a parent meant putting children before romance, That family was chosen, not just given. The Bugatti was never replaced. Richard said he did not need it anymore. That expensive cars were a waste of money that could be better spent on college funds and family vacations. He bought a minivan instead, something practical that could fit 3 kids and their sports equipment and all the chaos that came with them. Emma secretly thought it was the best decision he ever made. The minivan had cup holders and DVD players, and that specific smell of French fries and soccer cleats that meant family, that meant love, that meant home. Sometimes, late at night when everyone else was asleep, Emma would think about that day with the markers. About 3 kids who just wanted their father to notice them. About a maid who was not a maid, but a woman hiding from her own broken heart. About a mother who made terrible choices but loved completely. About a father who left but learned to come back. About all the ways a family could break and then slowly, painfully, beautifully put itself back together into something new. The marker drawings were gone, painted over like they never existed. But Emma knew they were still there underneath, permanent and indelible. A reminder that love could be messy and imperfect and still matter. That sometimes the biggest mistakes led to the most important truths. That family was not about perfection or biology or even honesty at the beginning. It was about showing up after you failed, about choosing each other every single day even when it was hard, about loving people not because they were yours by blood, but because you decided they were yours by choice. High school brought new challenges. Emma became captain of the debate team, fierce and brilliant, using words as weapons the way she had once used permanent markers. Mason got into robotics, building machines with the same analytical mind that had tried to logic his way through family trauma. Lucas applied to art school, his drawings evolving from childish pain into sophisticated beauty, turning trauma into something the world could see and feel. Richard showed up for everything. Every debate tournament, every robotics competition, every art show. He sat next to Catherine and Isabella, 3 adults who had learned to co-parent despite everything, who had chosen peace over bitterness. They were not friends exactly, but they were allies in loving 3 children who needed them all. College applications came with questions about family, about parents, about home. Emma wrote her essay about the day she vandalized a Bugatti and destroyed a family, and somehow built a better one from the ruins. She wrote about learning that fathers were made, not born, that family was about choice, not chromosomes, that love could survive even the worst betrayals if people were brave enough to forgive and wise enough to change. She got into Harvard. The essay about the Bugatti and broken families and permanent marker was cited by the admissions officer as one of the most honest things they had ever read. Mason wrote about DNA and psychology and the science of attachment. He got into MIT. Lucas's portfolio was full of images of fractured families and healing hearts. He got into Rhode Island School of Design. All 3 of them left home at 18. Ready to build their own lives, carrying with them the lessons learned from watching their family implode and slowly reconstruct. But they came home for holidays, all of them, to the house Catherine and Isabella shared, the home they had built together. Richard would come over for dinner, bringing wine and stories and the grandchildren he eventually had, with a woman who understood that his past was complicated and loved him anyway. They would sit around a table too small for all of them, laughing too loud, talking over each other, a chaotic, beautiful mess of people who had chosen to be family. Emma kept the bracelet Richard had given her, wore it even on her wedding day years later, when she married someone who understood that family was complicated and loved her anyway. She would touch the charms sometimes, the heart and the star and the tiny angel, and remember being 7 years old with a permanent marker, trying to make her father see her. She would remember the pain and the healing, the breaking and the rebuilding, the loss and the finding. She would remember that the best families are not the ones without scars. They are the ones who earn their scars together, who survive the breaking, who choose each other even when biology says they do not have to. They are the families built on forgiveness and choice and love that persists even when it should not, even when it is hard, even when everything falls apart. The Bugatti story became family legend, told at holidays and celebrations, embellished with each retelling. The time 3 kids took permanent markers to a $3 million car and accidentally saved their family by destroying it. The time a lie about paternity revealed truths about love. The time a maid was not a maid but a guardian angel in disguise. The time everything broke and somehow ended up better than before. Emma was 30 years old, with her own children, when she finally told them the full story. Her daughter asked if she was angry at her grandmother for lying, at her grandfather for leaving, at everyone for making everything so complicated. Emma thought about it for a long time before answering. "I was angry for a long time," she said finally. "But anger is heavy, and forgiveness is light. They made mistakes, terrible ones, but they also fought to fix them. They showed me that love is not about being perfect. It is about being brave enough to stay when things get hard, to apologize when you are wrong, to rebuild when everything falls apart. That is worth more than never making mistakes in the first place." Her daughter thought about that, then asked, "Would you do it again? Vandalize the car?" Emma smiled, touching the bracelet she still wore. "In a heartbeat. Sometimes you have to break things to fix them. Sometimes the only way to be seen is to do something so dramatic that people have no choice but to look. That marker drawing was the best mistake I ever made." And it was true. That one act of childish rebellion, born from desperation and pain, had started a chain reaction that led to truth and healing. It had exposed lies that needed to be exposed. It had brought Isabella out of hiding. It had forced Richard to confront his anger and Catherine to face her mistakes. It had torn their family apart so it could be rebuilt stronger, honest, real. The Bugatti was long gone, sold or repainted or sitting in some collector's garage. But the marks those 3 children made remained, invisible but permanent, etched not on paint but on hearts. A reminder that family is not about perfection. It is about showing up. It is about choosing each other every single day, even when biology says you do not have to. It is about love that persists through lies and betrayals and pain. It is about permanent marks made with permanent markers, visible or not, that say, "I was here, I existed, I mattered, I loved you, and you are mine." Emma looked at her own children, thought about the family she had built with lessons learned from a broken one. She thought about Richard, who had learned to be a father by losing the right to be one and fighting to earn it back. She thought about Catherine, who had learned that honesty was harder but better than convenient lies. She thought about Isabella, who had loved from the shadows until someone finally saw her. She thought about Mason and Lucas, her brothers, her constants, the ones who had stood beside her through everything. And she thought about that 7-year-old girl with a permanent marker and a broken heart, who decided to make her father see her the only way she knew how. That girl who had no idea her act of vandalism would lead to this, to healing, to truth, to a family built on choice instead of lies. She touched her bracelet one more time and smiled. It had been worth it. Every tear, every fight, every painful revelation, it had all been worth it to get here, to this moment of peace and love and family chosen deliberately instead of accepted blindly. The triplets had drawn on their father's Bugatti because they wanted him to notice they existed. They had exposed secrets that destroyed their family. But from those ruins, they had built something better, something real, something that lasted. And that, Emma thought, was the most beautiful ending she could have ever imagined.